I'm Natasha Ryan with the North Group. This is our podcast, Time to Head North, and I am so excited to have my two guests here today with me. I'm gonna intro you both and then let you do your own backgrounds here. So up top, we have Ron Conlon. He's done years and years of volunteer work with the American Red Cross. He's a veteran security professional. Down below, we have Jason Butts, who is actually in Florida and the Director of Security for Americana Labs. So I'm going to start with you, Ron. Just give us a little bit about who you are, background, and don't forget to unmute.
Good morning, Natasha. Thanks for
Morning.
having me on. Yeah, I've been volunteering with the Red Cross for a few decades, since 1986, I guess. And I've been involved in disasters throughout the world, everything from hurricanes, which we're talking about now, to volcanoes and floods and fires and you name it. My first exposure to a hurricane was when I lived in New Orleans in my teens. We got wiped out by Hurricane Betsy in 1965. And my exposure with the Red Cross continued on from there when I was in the service and then when I was in law enforcement. So I figured that was kind of a sign that I should be involved. And the most prominent hurricane I think I've worked with Hurricane Sandy. I worked Superstorm Sandy for some period of time and learned a lot from exactly what a hurricane can do to people. So I've been in the security profession since I retired from law enforcement. So that was 25, 30 years ago. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show and talk about the hurricanes and what the Red Cross is doing.
Thank you so much, Ron. Jason?
Hey, Natasha. Jason Butts with Americana Laboratories. I'm the Director of Corporate Security down here in Florida, Jacksonville. I've got about 25 years under my belt of security experience working on all sorts of different verticals within the security industry and coming from a lot of different experiences that I can tap into. Been on numerous hurricane details, both pre-deployment and post-disaster deployments. So looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm going to actually go to you, Jason, first, because you're in Florida. You know, we have the death toll over 100. The president's set to visit tomorrow. I guess I want to start with what was it like? What did you experience? Obviously, Jacksonville wasn't heavily hit or affected like Fort Myers or the other areas in Florida. But kind of what do you have to do when you're in Florida? What'd you see and what'd you have to do to prepare for the storms?
Well, the number one thing, and I just want to point out, Jacksonville was definitely spared in this case where we're located. However, as the storm was approaching down around Fort Myers, I was actually in the Fort Myers area visiting with a client down there, and I was watching the initial bands come through, and you could just kind of sense that this was going to be a rough one, especially for the way it came on shore. But security overall, you have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan from either a business, standpoint or from a personal standpoint with your family, if you don't have a plan, when it's time to make decisions, you're not going to know what to do. And then you start having conversations. Well, what do we do? When the hurricane's bearing down on you, that is not the time to, have those conversations. Those conversations need to be happening before, disaster strikes, long before disaster strikes. So having a plan in place is really the most paramount thing. And it doesn't matter whether it's hurricanes, earthquakes, like Ron said, volcanoes. Even if there's a volcano in your area, you need to have a plan for what's going to happen. And that's kind of the basis of security, to really understand what the threats you are that are facing, what the risks are in your area, and put something together so that when it happens and everybody starts panicking, you have a plan that you can implement and you know exactly what to do moving forward.
What kind of specific things do you have to do that most people wouldn't think about?
For a hurricane, for example, we look at, obviously, what is the strength of the storm? We have different plans based on what is coming our way, what's going to be heading towards us. Do we need to put up the shutters? What side of the building is going to be the most affected? What are our plans for power restoration? What is our business continuity plan? What is our communication plan, both pre, during, and post disaster? And these are all things that, even though Jacksonville did not get hit in this one specific time, we spent an entire week preparing our facility and our communication plans and making sure that, and testing everything ahead of the storm to make sure everything was going to function properly for us.
Absolutely. It's getting to the left of it instead of the right of it, which is the premise of all security functions, right? As you said. Ron, I want to go to you for like the preps on the humanitarian side, right? So when the American Red Cross hears that Hurricane Ian is on the way, what's the first thing that the Red Cross enacts to prepare?
Well, first of all, I can tell Jason's been around the block in disasters. You can tell from listening to him. But regarding Ian, the Red Cross, before the first wind, before the first raindrops, we started to deploy volunteers and equipment and supplies down to Florida. We currently have about 1,200 volunteers from around the country that are in Florida helping set up shelters. We have about 120 vehicles, 80 of those being used for mobile feeding sites going around different locations. As of day before yesterday, we served with our partners about 120,000 meals. We have 33 emergency shelters that we're operating either solely or in partnership with one of our other partners. And so staging that ahead of time gave us the opportunity to be ready. And as Jason mentioned, you have to have a plan ahead of time, because waiting to the last minute, it's too late by then.
Everything kind of centers in life around security, in my opinion, right? So something even as important as making sure there are meals to feed people. If there isn't food, right, that can lead to unrest and security concerns. My question is, with the inflation prices we're seeing with food and the supply chains, has that affected the Red Cross's ability to get things down to Florida the way they need to?
Well, it hasn't prevented us from being able to serve our clients, but obviously it's impacted us financially. And our donors give us money, and it's our responsibility to use it wisely. And working in Florida, we're working with one of our partners, the Baptist missions, and the Southern Baptist, and they set up kitchens and can prepare up to 40,000 meals a day, and those meals are then distributed geographically to the most needy areas.
So when you're in the middle of the storm and you have people's lives in danger, what does the Red Cross do in those moments? Like, we know what it does leading up to it now. What happens in those moments? Does everyone just hunker down and kind of pray for the best, or do you have volunteers out there? How does that work? What does that look like?
Well, first of all, we have local volunteers in Florida, and then bringing in volunteers from all around the country. But what's important is strategically looking at where the least amount of damage may be to set up a shelter, because we certainly don't want to endanger our volunteers or the clients that we end up serving. It's like the Hotel Red Cross, where people come in and are put up and expect to be in a safe environment. And so being able to look at the plans and being able to decipher which areas are the best areas to set up, and then advertise that through the media to get people to come to the shelters.
Jason, I want to come to you now. Like, I'm kind of doing this chronologically, if you haven't picked up on that. So we're in the middle of the storm. What does it look like from a security perspective and business perspective, right? That you have to cease operations. How does that impact your company?
Well, obviously, there's going to be a loss of revenue. But again, going back to the fundamental of if you have a plan, these are things that you can plan for, which falls into the business continuity. When you're in the middle of the storm, nothing's happening. You're entirely focused on the storm. You're entirely focused on maintaining the integrity of your facility. And most times people are not actually in our building. Now, thankfully, we have a wonderful building that we're housed in that can withstand just about any kind of hurricane that would come through. So we really have a safe and secure facility here. But as far as business operations go, everything comes to a standstill. There's no supply chain coming in. There's no supplies going out. Personnel are not able to come in, to the building, and because safety is the priority. Safety is paramount above everything when it comes to these storms. We want our staff to be home. We want them to be safe. We want them to be with their families. And in the middle of the storm, if something happens, our employees also have access to our facility as a safe refuge to get to if something happens to their home or something of that nature. Not every business can do that, but most businesses in the area just shut down, hunker down, and we try to get everything back open as quick as possible and start providing services as quick as possible, once the storm has gone through.
I would imagine, you being in Florida, you have quite a few of those days in the budget where you say this could have a no revenue day, right? Because of your geographic location.
Yep.
So, going back to the human side of all of this, Jason, you're in Florida. What have you seen? I mean, you were in one of the hardest hit areas at the time of the hurricane. What kind of losses, are your clients, your employees, your family, your friends? What are you seeing there?
Well, Natasha, I was in at the very, very beginning when it first started bringing the outer bands on shore. So I wasn't there for the mass destruction that ensued. I actually was planning on staying overnight in the area, but the situation down there was deteriorating so rapidly. I made the choice to get on the highway and evacuate out of the area and get back up to Jacksonville. But I've talked to a lot of my friends that are deployed down there. They're having difficult times. It is disaster. A couple people referenced Mexico City and the disaster we had in Mexico City just a few years ago. They're saying that it is equivalent to, if not worse, for the amount of damage that was done. They said it's just absolutely catastrophic. And these are seasoned guys that have been out, post hurricane details. They were in Puerto Rico after Maria. They're down in Fort Myers right now, and they're saying it's pretty bad. So I think we've got a long road to reconstruction of the Fort Myers Naples area down there. And from the human side of it, one of the things that I learned a long time ago is when you listen to your local emergency operations personnel, your local emergency operations center, you can listen to the National Weather Service all you want. You can listen to, the Weather Channel all you want. But if you're not listening to your local emergency operations communications, they're the ones that are going to tell you when it's time to go. And people need to heed those warnings, especially if they're not prepared for what's coming their way.
Do you think most people even know that?
Probably not. A lot of people watch the Weather Channel. A lot of people think I'll just watch the news. But a hurricane coming on shore can change course at any last minute, and the first people to have that information is going to be your emergency operations center, and they're the ones they're on social media, they're on local radio. They put out all this information routinely and regularly. Any updates that come out, that is much more viable source of information than waiting for the next 2-minute video segment from the Weather Channel.
Ron, what are your volunteers seeing? Have you heard any stories or reports back?
Sure. I mean, the emotional stress that people go through when they lose their homes. I mean, first of all, it's really difficult for people to evacuate because your home is your castle, and all your mementos, your whole life is is based around where you live. And for them to evacuate is stressful to begin with. And then when they get to the shelters, they're listening to the news, they're watching how their homes are being destroyed. Um, so there's tremendous amount of anxiety. And so our mental health people work full time trying to provide services to people to make it just a little bit easier for them to cope with the disaster and also the long and tedious and complex recovery that needs to take place with tens of thousands of people in Florida over the next couple of years. So our volunteers uh, have felt that pain and felt that stress as well, and we provide counseling to our volunteers as well. And they've seen everything from clients showing up with possessions and then having a snake pop out of one of their bags or whatever that they didn't realize got in there. And heck, in Florida, I was about to curse. In Florida, I mean, you got gators, so
I thought of that. Ugh.
yeah, that's got to be a challenge that a lot of us have never faced before, is having to worry about a gator coming up on you. But most of our volunteers that are down in Florida are veterans. They've been through situations before, so um, they know what to look for. But the biggest thing with our clients is and our volunteers is the stress level.
What is the biggest security concern right now moving forward post hurricane? And I want to open this up to both of you as security professionals. People are at their most vulnerable right now at this moment. They've lost things. They probably don't have internet. The cell phone coverage is, I don't know if that's been completely restored, but what is the biggest? Is it cyber? Is it physical? What do you think the biggest security threat is right now to these hurricane victims in Florida?
Well, as far as viewpoint, my viewpoint is that first of all, you have people that travel the country specifically going to disasters to perpetrate crimes, to take advantage of the elderly, to take advantage of people that are stressed out, waiting for people to leave their homes before they go in and pilfer. You also have a variety of groups that try to start up collections for uh, disaster funds that are fraudulent,
Mm-hmm.
and so those are those are the kind of things that unfortunately happen anytime you have a disaster, and we are very very cautious about when we set up a shelter, making sure that it's safe for our clients, so that people that from the outside that may want to take advantage of those clients or their security are kept out.
Jason, I want to come to you. Like, as far as, my thought is so much of the crime that is hitting us lately is not just physical, it's cyber, right? Like people going in and taking information. When you're shut down and you're not all hands on deck, and is during these moments, is that a big concern for your company?
Actually, ironically, Natasha, it's not, because we have plans put in place, and obviously, I'm not going to get into the exact parts of the plan, but we do backups on everything. Everything is shut down. Everything's taken offline, so we don't really have to worry too much about cyber. Some businesses like being able to completely disconnect and take offline. Some businesses say absolutely not. We can't go offline. So obviously it becomes a threat. But even then, cyber is not too much of an issue during a natural disaster, because if you're still online, everything's being managed from a remote location. So even though someone's not physically in the building, watching for threats or any attacks that come onto your databases or your servers, you still have someone remotely, as well as good security programs in place already. So it's not too much of a threat that we see.
I wonder if we're going to see more people's personal bank accounts who are victims get hit through all of this while they're down and offline. Thoughts?
I would say that most likely. One of the things, if you've never been in a post-hurricane situation, there is debris everywhere. And when someone loses their house, like Ron was saying, that is their belongings, that is their personal effects. You're going to find mortgage papers floating around in the street, bank statements floating around, blowing in the wind. Effects go everywhere. There's no way to contain it all. So yeah, there is probably some likelihood that people will have some identity theft out of it, and there are, of course, predators, like Ron was saying, that prey on these people when they're down on their luck, when they're having the hardest time of their lives and going through something so significant.
And I guarantee in the aftermath of all of this, they're not thinking clearly, reasonably, why they're not thinking clearly, but they're also not thinking to these threats, right? So, Ron, how does the American Red Cross, move forward, like post hurricane? What do you teach your clients to do to safeguard after a hurricane and keep themselves protected? Does the Red Cross touch on that?
A little bit. Our primary concern working with the clients long term is their recovery, and their personal security as far as going back to their homes and everything else. We leave that up to the professionals to handle. We do give them tips, everything on what to look for when they go back to their house. If the front door is stuck, don't try to open it because it could be holding up the rest of the house. Try to find another way in. Look for the snakes, look for the bugs, and when you're going out in the area that's been flooded, we're talking about gasoline, we're talking about chemicals, household chemicals, all the kind of things that can be an irritant to your skin or even lethal in some situations. So just trying to tell people to be careful. Don't go out in flip flops to take a look and see what damage that your house has, and get nails stuck through. I mean, simple things that people don't think of.
Right.
They're used to being in the warm weather and wearing flip flops, and then they go try to find and salvage what they can from their homes.
Talking about having to watch for gators and snakes is just surreal to me. I mean, I'm in Seattle. I can't even wrap my head around that. I think I would maybe just drop dead of a heart attack if I saw a snake or a gator come out and come at me. But these are all real threats. I want to shift now to the sustained need for giving, because I'm sure, America, God bless us, has the attention spans of gnats. So as something new comes into the news cycle and the hurricane goes out, how challenging is it to keep it in the news at the forefront and keep the donations and the money coming in, Ron?
Well, you're absolutely right. The news cycle has a lot to do with people's generosity at times, because they go to another disaster and start to donate there. But our donors that have been with us for a long time are the backbone of the Red Cross funding, and we constantly reach out to the public through PSAs and through other sources that the situation continues on just because the news cycle has changed. We're talking in Florida, we're probably talking a couple years before they even see daylight with the amount of damage. Judging from Superstorm Sandy, heck, they're still working on recovery, and that's been how long? So yeah, it's a challenge, but knock on wood, so far our donors have come through, and we look forward to being able to service the clients to the best of our ability.
Jason, you're in Florida, and we're talking about the rebuild. I mean, what does that even look like in your opinion? You know, you have clients down there, you're hearing the stories, you see the damage from your local stations and news updates and clients and colleagues. I mean, what does this road even look like at this point?
I think the beautiful thing about Florida is, well, we live in paradise and we've been through these hurricanes before, so we kind of are adept, and our local governments and local communities are adept at starting the process of rebuilding. Every storm is different. The damage that is done is different in every storm. There's really no one way that rebuilding takes place other than someone's going to come in from the government level, on the local, state level, one of those two, and they're going to say, this is what needs to happen. And that's where the emergency planners, the crisis managers that are employed by the local governments are really going to come into play. And I do agree with Ron. We have a long ways to go to rebuild from this. And this is not something that we're going to be, in 12 months, everything's going to be back to normal. That's just not going to be possible with the amount of destruction that was done down there for this one.
My last question is, after Katrina, people kind of got a wake up call on listening at the evacuation orders. Did we see enough people evacuate this time or not really?
I was actually in some of that evacuation traffic, and it was handled really well. And I think more people evacuated for this storm than historically would have been. I don't have any numbers to back that up, but from what I've seen and from reports that I'm hearing, more evacuated than didn't evacuate, so to speak. I think people were taking this one seriously. Originally, even just the day before this came on shore, they were talking about this being a Category 3. And then almost overnight, it turned into a Category 4, almost 2 miles an hour less than a Category 5, and then decided to come ashore. So I think people, they got that wake-up call in Katrina. They're starting to understand, if there's a mandatory evacuation order, you might want to go ahead and listen to that. But it's hard for people to leave their castle behind, like Ron said. It's a very emotional thing to evacuate, look at your house in the rearview mirror, and realize you may never see it again. So I think people are paying attention more now, but it's something that you're never going to be able to evacuate 100% of the people.
Ron, I want to come to you for the last question. Not only do you need donations, but you need manpower. You need people to volunteer. So if anyone's listening or watching this that kind of had an inclination to maybe do it one day or says, how can I help? What would you say to them?
We can definitely use the help. And if they go to 1-800-RED Cross or redcross.org, they can sign up to be a volunteer. And they can also donate through both 1-800-RED Cross or redcross.org.
And I want to make sure people understand, because I've gone through the training years and years ago, and it's not still in effect. But the Red Cross does train you. They don't just throw you to the wolves and say, go.
No,
right, Ron?
we try not to throw them out to the wolves. No, they go through basic training, just like going to work for a company and learning the ropes. So they go through basic training, and then they're always working with somebody that has experience, that has been out before, that can kind of guide them in the right direction as well. So yeah, the training doesn't take that long, and people pick up on it pretty well, because a lot of it is just being savvy on how to get involved, how to talk to people. Having people skills is important when we're operating shelters, that our volunteers can communicate effectively with our clients. Teaching them now, the big thing these days is not only evacuating and putting up shelters for people, but also their pets, which is a real challenge. And some people bring snakes and lizards and that's their pets. So it's a challenge, because if you ever try to operate a shelter with dogs and cats and snakes all in the same room, it can be it can be kind of hectic. So
that in itself requires a security team.
exactly, yeah, we have to get Jason to come in and help out.
Yeah, I don't do animals, Ron. Sorry, man.
Jason's bowing out on that one. Well, hey, listen, of course, our thoughts and prayers are with all those affected, all of those serving the greater good and volunteering. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And of course, to all of you, please stay tuned. We are going to have more episodes, of course, and you can check out past ones on our website at tngdefense.com. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Natasha. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you, Ron. Thanks, Natasha.
Bye, everyone.